and are we actually doing are we meeting the customer's expectation?
Right.
And how do we actually know what the customer's expectation is at that point? And I think there's some critical pieces in there. It's really important to understand.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers, and every episode I do, I get to sit down with different practitioners of everything process, whether it's working on internal processes, external processes, working with on the customer journey, and every interview I do, they're so unique. We're looking into the experiences of these different people that are day in, day out, understanding, managing their business processes and improving them as well. Putting that into practice every day. And today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Nicole Dollin from the NRMA. Now, Nick is the Senior Manager of Channel Sales Strategy and Enablement. She currently works at NRMA, but has worked across various operational teams throughout her working career. I'm really excited for this interview today. Nick, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's good to be here.
Great. So what we might do to get into it is, that was a very brief introduction to you and what you do, but so our audience has a bit more of a grid and background for the experience that you have done. Can you take us all the way back to, I guess, where you first started working in the area of process or that customer journey, and when that first, I guess, whether it was an alarm bell or a light bulb moment where you're like, well, this actually, this is important, this is valuable to an organization, that we actually understand what's going on here, and then take us on a journey leading up to where you are today and what you're doing.
Great, thanks. So I might go right back to probably where many people start is in the grassroots of frontline, and obviously that would be the first time that I really understood how the customer journey impacts a number of things, including the experience I was having as a frontline colleague.
Right.
Yeah, and look, I think probably the first learning that I can remember is when I worked for an insurance company, and they changed their CRM, or their core system.
Right.
And it was very technically driven, and the approach and the training was also very technically driven. And very quickly, as we were on the front line and trying to hit our KPIs and performance and provide the desired customer experience, it actually dawned on me that all the technical pieces that the organisation had given us to implement or to carry out that change didn't actually help the customer journey itself, and in fact felt like it had been totally skipped over. And I think it's probably the first time that that kind of hit me as a young, much more shiny person back then. The extreme importance of actually making sure that those things actually come together.
Yes, that's great. And now looking at customer journey, I think it's something that organizations, if they don't take the time, effort, and energy to understand what the customer experience is, oftentimes what's actually happening and what they think's happening is two completely different things. For example, I talked to different organizations, and there was one in particular that they did some study and some analysis on, okay, what is actually the customer doing, and in this simple process, this simple customer journey, they found that out of 1,500 cases of this one process, there were 800 different variants. There's 800 different ways a customer was navigating through this experience, and a lot of them were having a poor experience because it wasn't very simple, it wasn't very streamlined. Can you talk to us about the importance of understanding that as a first port of call?
Yeah, and so I'll draw on my current experience in my current role, is that the NRMA is we're a value chain. We supply road service to people that are in need and broken down on the side of the road, and the scenarios in which that can happen, and what has occurred, and are they on a freeway, are they safe, all of those really important things from a customer perspective all come into play. And very similar, the amount of processes that it takes to understand, I suppose, to execute in those scenarios in the right manner is just extraordinary. And I think, the important thing, or what I've learned over time, is to really understand what the intended job of that process is. So if the intended the intended job of that process is to get to the customer in a timely manner that's broken down on the side of a freeway, and to get them moving in with this time, does the process actually deliver that? And are we actually doing are we meeting the customer's expectation?
Right.
And how do we actually know what the customer's expectation is at that point? And I think there's some critical pieces in there. It's really important to understand when you are looking at those processes, all those different scenarios, and how they actually end up, is what data and evidence do we have that actually shows us, from an organizational perspective, a stakeholder perspective, a scientific perspective, all of those different data points that you need to make a data-led decision, to go, are we actually solving the problem? Are we meeting the customer's expectation? And have we found that nice equilibrium across the business and the customer?
Yes, great. And obviously it's very easy to, or much easier, I'd imagine, to get that feedback from, internal customers or internal stakeholders. But talk to us about, I guess, reaching out to your customers and trying to understand those customer expectations. Obviously there'd be many different ways of doing that, but what seems to be most effective for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think, we have standard, the NPS surveys, have those across our different touch points and transactions for our customers. But I think recently, what I'm most proud of is actually one of the members of my team has introduced well, I suppose it's a process within itself, for senior leaders, so leaders of leaders, and also team leaders, to actually pick from that database, the NPS database, and call the customer back and actually have a one-on-one conversation about the process the customer went through and what their experience was, and really understand it from we have a walking in your shoes, I suppose, value or behaviour that we have at the NRMA, but it helps us understand and take that empathy lens.
Yes,
To really understand, from the customer's perspective, are we actually doing the right thing by the customer? Did we actually do the job that we intended to do and deliver the experience? So I'm really actually quite proud that we're actually launching that internally and starting to work with those leaders of leaders and team leaders to, when they're sitting in the room and they're talking about customer and they're talking about process, that they actually can draw on some real experience and bring them right down to where where we need to be, and that's in front of the customer and understanding what they expect.
That's awesome. That's great. And do you have any examples for us where you've received that feedback from a customer or many different customers? And maybe it's a reoccurring feedback you're getting from different customers, and you decide to, we need to focus on this critical process here, this critical customer journey. We need to improve this. Do you have any examples of a process where you've made a tweak, whether it's small or whether it's a significant change, and that has delivered huge value? Do you have any examples like that that you could share?
Yeah, I do. And, I think in my current role at the moment, I have customer facing or external customers, and I also have internal customers. And I might actually talk about an internal customer one, because what it did was it was able to really bring to life the importance of the customer experience, but the colleague experience, and how it all wraps in nicely together, that, gives everyone, a good feeling about doing a certain thing.
Yes.
So in our operational space, we do have, probably like many organizations, some very manual workarounds, and we were able to recently replace this manual workaround with an automated tool. And this is where our operational colleagues, they were manually vetting and processing a particular task. And the endpoint was that the customer would receive certain information about what was going to happen next. And with the automation solution that we put in, so we understood manually what was actually occurring, what the touch points were, the time that the customer would receive the information, what the customer would do with the information. Is that the right information? Is it the right time? So we asked all of those, all of those questions, and we were able to build an automated process, also semi-automated process, where it actually promoted efficiency, and it saved about 130 hours of human intervention a month. Which meant that our customers, at the end of it, what it meant is our customers actually received the information in a more timely manner, and then they were able to act on that quite quickly. So, I think it was quite significant. It was probably the first, when I in the operational team that I lead, it was the first big kind of automation piece that we went down. And that's actually just paved the way and built some of that very important evidence and data to go, if we do this, these are the customer outcomes that we actually get.
Yeah, that's huge, because you've got that time that you've bought back now that you can redeploy those resources in different areas. That's really valuable for an organization. And I think that's one thing it's so important to understand is small tweaks can deliver huge value. In improving that customer journey or that internal process, it doesn't need to be significant, like radical change. You can get significant value from small tweaks.
Yeah, and in fact, Daniel, I think that small victory mindset actually provides you with more of an adaptive approach. So
Yes.
you're actually scanning externally and internally with those small victories, and then you're adapting to the customer's expectation in more real time, which I think is actually a more valuable way of getting to an endpoint. It doesn't have to be that big bang, to your point. It can be iterative change that helps you actually adapt and learn along the way.
Yes. And with the business landscape changing so rapidly, particularly through COVID, if you embark on a 12, 18-month project, who knows, by the end of that project, the landscape will have changed, and you should have been focusing on something else going back 6 months ago.
Oh, completely. And, I think that the landscape, or the environment that we're in at the moment, which we term a lot around that VUCA, environment, and it's very much the pace of the change at the moment. And I see that as a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Right.
Our customers' expectations are changing. COVID absolutely accelerated the digitization of a lot of ways that we communicate and touch our customers. And I think that to your point, if we're not if we're not doing that small victories, or even looking externally quite often, we could miss that opportunity, and we'll be left behind.
Yeah, that's good. And now talk to me about business process management and how that links or ties into the customer experience. Because I know that, the conversation we had before we got started with this interview, we're talking about Ant, who we interviewed obviously previously on Process Pioneers. And he obviously, his world is process understanding, managing, improving business processes. And I know that you work closely with him. So talk to me about, or us about, that relationship between business process management and the customer experience.
Yeah. So I think starting with the business process management, my experience is that, and Ant talks about this just absolutely beautifully, and I love listening to him talk all day long, is that it needs to be clear and standardized, and it needs to be easy to use and easy to understand. And I think that's a really good way to start. And we need to have the appropriate customer design at the center of that. So will it address the service quality, the product quality, and will it ultimately achieve an improved customer and employee experience? And with that comes, and I'm going to use the word governance, which I think is a little bit, a bit boring, the governance word. But I think that there's a real need for, when you look at the business process management, is ownership. So who actually owns it, and who's going to not own it only within the change period or the adaptive period, but who's going to own it ongoing and make sure that it is doing the job that it's supposed to do, back to what I was saying before, and doing that external piece. And I think how it fits into kind of the overall organization and the strategy is that the NRMA, our purpose is people moving people. So people are at the center of everything that we do. And,
Yes.
in order for us to execute our process, we need to take that customer-centered approach. It's fundamental to our strategy implementation. So, this involves, listening to our members, listening to our customers, listening to our frontline, who have so many awesome gems around what's playing out technically and adaptively, and what the things that we need to actually change to be successful. And I think that, coming up when you're actually doing those things and you're thinking about it from a leadership perspective, you need to collaborate and involve the right people, and have the key stakeholders in the room that can actually really build that out without having too many unknowns or unintended consequences in there.
Yes. Yep. That's great. And you mentioned there about how, how important it is for customer experience to tie into the overall strategy. And, for some organizations where that link isn't so clear, or maybe to the executive team, sometimes it can be hard to, I guess, it's important to get that buy-in. It's important to get that sponsorship from that senior leadership level. Can you talk to us, because it sounds like at NRMA there is a strong link there between the customer experience, what the customer journey is, and the overall strategy of the organization. Can you talk to us maybe about how that's been approached, and I guess how important that buy-in or that sponsorship from that senior level is?
Yeah, so I'll draw on my experiences at the NRMA and what I've done around getting that buy-in. But I will say, from a maturity perspective, the NRMA is quite along in their journey around this customer centricity
Right.
and an approach. And I'm lucky enough to have leaders around me that do actually share that lens. However, it does not mean that I don't have to go in every time it's I need to build a business case or pitch something, that the customer examples need to be at the forefront of what we're trying to do.
Right.
And there's a couple of ways that I draw on that. And sometimes it's about this, and I think about, is this mind blowing? And it's probably not, but it's the simple things. Find a recorded call, obviously that meets PCI compliance and everything's removed, but it actually shows they can hear the customer, they can hear the consultant, and they can actually live and breathe that experience. Or take them through the journey. So one of the examples is, previously there was lots of different I suppose artifacts that the customer used to receive, and taking those into the execs and going, so if you were a customer, you would get this, and just go, so and would you read all this, and what would this mean to you, and do you know what this means, and really bringing it right down to that human level, because at the end of the day, we're all customers and we're all human, and getting that buy-in through just real practical, tangible, everyday examples that helps build that, or I suppose crystallize in that clarity for the execs to go, yeah, right, this is something we need to change, we need to invest something here.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good. And when an organization is, embarking on a journey of understanding the customer journey, because, there'll be a range of different people listening to this. There'll be people that are within an organization where there isn't that focus, so much of a focus on customer. There'll be organizations that are much further along that maturity sort of path. But what is one of the biggest mistakes you see when an organization embarks on, understanding that customer journey, that customer experience, maybe something that a challenge that they face, a hurdle that they come to, or a mistake that they make?
Yeah, well, I've definitely made a few in my time, but have learnt from them directly. Is I think one mistake that is around assuming that what the customer experience is. So no matter which way you cut it, and you're in the organization and you live and breathe the processes and the product or the service, you will be biased by that lens. And so making some assumptions, and assumptions are okay, but you need to actually test those assumptions. So don't make the assumptions and go, I know it's like this because I know the process.
Right.
The mistake there is actually not, and you'll hear me talk about this all day long, is you're not actually gathering the evidence required to understand what you're actually trying to solve for.
Right.
What is the problem? What is the customer experience? And the only way to really unearth all of those things is to gather the data. It is to speak to the customer, speak to the colleagues that do it, actually go through the process yourself as well. So don't just rely on one piece of evidence or data that will give you that that lens or that customer journey, but triangulate that, find a few of them, and understand what those themes are. And I think also, something else that, a mistake that comes up quite often, and sometimes keep reminding ourselves, even internally at the NRMA, is if you do have a customer journey or issue that you're trying to either to anticipate one in the future, and you're being future focused, is don't jump straight into the technical side of things. Think about it from an adaptive, but so what is the actual problem we're trying to solve for? Then talk about the technical solution.
Yes.
I have seen it quite often that people jump straight into the technical side of things. You start gathering requirements and going into your, your business requirement documents and ADDs and all of those things that we're all familiar with. But and really going into that actually means that you're not unearthing the actual problem or the customer pain point itself, which
Yes.
means you're actually not taking into consideration the customer journey.
Right. That's great. And now looking to the future of customer experience, it's the, as we've been talking about, the business landscape, the environment. It's changed quite rapidly this year. And it's not just COVID, it's technology as well. It's, different way. We've got smartphones glued to our hips. We've got apps we can access at the touch of a button. Our homes are smart homes now. We can call out a command and things will happen. Talk to us about the future of customer experience and what you see as some of the, I guess, the challenges. Let's start with the challenges, and then we'll move on to what are the most exciting opportunities.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, well, I think so. I suppose in my head, Daniel, I go, the challenges are probably the most exciting opportunities. So as I
Right.
actually unpack those, I go, they're the opportunities that we
Yes,
need to consider. And I think about the pace and the rate of change.
Yep.
And I think in previous years, very much from a internal and a customer perspective, change was very episodic. We just go up, we have this change, then we just normalize, and there's change again. And that's no longer our environment. It is just constant change in parallel, which is why it's important to be adaptive. And I think that's challenge number one, is the actual pace of the change, which means that the customer expectation is changing, the rate of response is changing, and that's why it's an exciting opportunity, because you really need to find, that the opportunities to find the balance between the digitized experience and the human interaction.
Right.
As well. And how do you have that multiple touch that provides, I suppose, the desired customer experience for the customer and also for the business? And I think having the right process management or the right process strategy in place to achieve that is a challenge and opportunity within itself as well. And that involves those things, like I said, around making sure that you boiling it right down to actually, are you documented? Are your processes documented? Do you have something that actually shows what your processes are?
Right.
Do you have something that shows what your customer journey is overlaying that process? Do you have owners to those? And just really starting with that hygiene piece to then help address those challenges and also start to work towards those opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. I think some organizations, when they've heard of documenting your processes, for some organization that it's almost a scary idea or a scary thing, because they've either done it in the past or they've heard about other organizations having done it. And you mentioned this earlier about what's the why, what's the purpose behind it? Because if you're just documenting for documenting's sake, you're going to get to the end of that process, and then those processes there, those documented processes will sit there and collect dust, as we've heard in a previous interview. So I think it's really important to have that process ownership, as you're talking about, someone responsible that can look at those processes, understand that this is where we are now, but we need to be continually improving this. We need to be looking for areas of opportunity. I need to be empowering my team. And that's another question I have actually is around with that customer experience. It's not just one person's role. You've got people on the front line that they're the ones that are on the calls, interacting with the people. Talk to us about how do you get them excited about looking for those areas of opportunity, because for some people it may not come naturally. Like you might have a frontline staff that are just yes people, that they'll do the job, they do what that you tell them to do, but they may not have that mind that is looking for where are the weak points, where are the pain points, how can we improve this? So talk to us, how do you empower those everyone in the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the so from where I've worked previously and where I work now, I have to say the NRMA's done it best, and that's not because I work there now, but that's because they have. And we've been able to execute a couple of, I suppose, communication forums for these to occur. And, so Yammer is one of them. And we've been able to, the channel managers have been able to execute, I suppose, a communication strategy with those guys to go, anything that comes up, you can post it on there. And people, so we have our CEO comment on processes that come up. They go, I've had this problem. People tag each other in it to go, can you help this person? So it's a real collaborative approach, and it's quite organic as well, which is really good, and it helps bring some pain points to light, but it also helps the frontline colleague or the operational colleague. It promotes a real safe to speak up environment. So,
Yes.
challenge the process if you don't think it's working properly. Tell us what the customers are thinking and feeling. We have this process called Listen, Learn, Act, which is quite a common process across organizations, where you go to the front line and say, right, so, what are some of the things that you're experiencing, or what are some of the pain points? And it's actually done in a nice framed way that a couple of my colleagues do. And, it's very interactive. And pre-COVID, it was with Post-it notes. With COVID, it's on a SharePoint site where digital Post-it notes go up, and they start to really draw out some of the things that are occurring on from a customer perspective and a frontline perspective that we're able to solve. But we actually don't walk away and solve them. We actually ask the questions: how would you like to see this solved? What do you think the solve is here? Where do you think we need to look? And then it helps them actually be fully involved in the process. When it starts to evolve into change and into something that's going to be implemented, when it's about to go live, that person's actually called out in the training or the pack or on Yammer or wherever it is to say, this change has come about because you called this out and made these suggestions, and we celebrate that, which I think is really important.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool to hear about the creating that safe environment for people to speak up in. They might be one of the newest employees, part of NRMA, part of the team. But if they're noticing those pain points or areas of opportunity, like it's really cool to see that you've got an environment there that people do feel like they can speak up, because there'd be some organizations out there where it would be you wouldn't get that opportunity. You wouldn't be able to speak to that person or that team member that's been in the organization for 20, 30, 40 years, and they've always done it the way that it's always been done, because there wouldn't be that space to improve. But it's cool to see that, it doesn't matter where you sit in the organization, you can present things forward.
Oh, absolutely. And I think my advice to those people and those leaders that are watching is, our frontline have all the answers. You just need to ask them. Yeah.
That's great. And now, for speaking about the people that will be listening to this, and whatever level of the organization they sit, they've been listening to our conversation around customer experience, customer journey, and the value that can bring to an organization. Where they want to learn more. So where do they go now? Where would you point them now that they've, there's a lot of resources out there. We have the internet, but sometimes that can be quite overwhelming. So where should you begin if you're like, we don't focus, we don't give customer experience the attention it deserves in our organization, where do we start?
So I can reflect on where I started, and I started. It was pre-LinkedIn days when I started. So I did start by building a network of people around me that. So I'm really big on cognitive diversity. I always have been. So people that think differently and view things differently, and giving those those different lenses, and having a real robust, challenging conversation. And I would say start with building your social and professional network,
Right.
and discuss these things openly. And that's really how you start to learn how others do it, what they draw on, what methodologies and frameworks, or whether they've made one up. And I think that, again, like that organic approach around those things. And with LinkedIn days, I actually reach out to people on LinkedIn that if I'm looking at a particular thing within my business unit, and I know I want to learn more about something, I reach out to people that have similar titles, or I know operate in that type of industry that we're trying to crack, and really, again, trying to build that network, and that that network of people to tap into.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, in 30 minutes, it's only it feels like so little time to be able to, dive into this topic. But I know from previous interviews that, it just creates a space to learn more about, okay, what is another organization doing? How does another person approach this? Whether they're in an organization that really champions understanding of customer experience, or champions understanding your processes, or whether it's a person that feels a bit like they're a lone ranger in an organization. They're in an organization of a couple of thousand people, and they're the only person that's been tasked with the role of understanding and improving their processes. So I know that, even though it's been short, I know that the audience will glean a lot from our conversation today. And guys that are listening, if you want to learn more, please feel free, and I hope this is okay, Nick, to reach out to Nick and connect with her on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions for her, by all means, we want to be able to share and collaborate, share ideas, and help each other improve the businesses that we work in. So, Nick, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you.